Well, welcome to Iris Delruby Ruprecht, founder and designer of Delruby, and the Swiss brand who's inviting Calla Haynes today, who's a Paris-based designer, founder of Calla. Welcome.
Thank you.
So perhaps, Iris, if you start telling us a little bit about Delruby.
Delruby. Okay, to tell about Delruby, I need to go back in time a little bit. I started off as a fashion designer, or couturière, en fait, and then I ventured into costume design, theatrical costuming, and film. Then, due to my formation, I somehow needed pattern making that was computer-aided design based, which led me to New York, and there somehow I ended up as a fashion designer, illustrator, millinery technique, and ended up doing fashion for big companies, came back and worked for several labels, and realized that it's not the path that I'm gonna be following up. I saw things that didn't align with me in terms of social situations or sustainable situations. I saw coloring of colors and fabrics and productions that were, to my eyes, not sustainable, but that is like 30 years ago. And I completely finished doing fashion at that time, and I founded a publishing house and started publishing for 12 years, where I was in the intersection of different designers, investigating on design processes, and I was very interested in research for different means, like interdisciplinary work. But then I started missing working with textiles and the creation, and I was seeking a way on how to get back to the system, and figured out it's hard to get back. I mean, to be 100% sustainable, I think it's impossible to produce at all. And then I came to a realization, okay, there's also other parts of being sustainable, purposeful, or mindful within the industry, so that I could go back to create in the fashion field. And that is where I started the project. A leap of faith led me to Nepal, and there I started working with families, founded a farm, so they can that they do not migrate and keep up their skills in hand weaving in Nepal and surroundings of Kathmandu.
And
5 years ago.
Okay. Yeah. And the pieces that you're presenting here today, do you want to tell us a little bit about those? What you're selling?
Yeah, well, first of all, I also want to thank you to be here, and that Maison Shift offers this possibility. I think it's really great to be invited as a group of designers, then being presented with other designers here in Paris. That's been a very fruitful encounter, and I brought with me a selection there because we are several artists. The space is limited, so it's been chosen by Maison Shift, and I brought a variety that shows 3 different types of weaving patterns and skills of 3 different families.
Okay, and so you are producing exclusively in Nepal?
For now, exclusively. Yes. At the beginning, I was also thinking of creating a craft atlas that would invite all other crafts people all over the world. But then I realized, as a one-woman show, it's maybe a bit of a bigger task that I will do later on in time.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And Calla, hello, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
So I founded my brand Calla in 2010 after having an amazing experience working in luxury fashion in Paris, and then freelancing as a textile designer for brands around the world. So I created a language in my brand. It was a ready-to-wear brand focused on textiles and prints. And I approached it the way we were taught at the time in school or at the time of the industry, which is you make a collection as big as you can, a big offering as you can. You listen to the buyer's feedback when they ask you to make it, lower the price, make it cheaper, make it easier, use this fabric, and you're not asking too many questions about how it's made, you're just trying to produce. And after 5 years of doing that, by myself, without a business partner, I reached that burnt out point where it was just completely unsustainable. Unsustainable, like in all sense of the word. And so I put the brand on hiatus. I was really sad about it, and I was left. The thing that overwhelmed me the most at that time was the amount of fabric I had left over. Fabrics I had designed that were very dear to me, but to meet the factory minimums, I had ordered too much, and then there was all this fabric left. And I was really hit with how much waste there is in the fashion industry. How textile production, it's one of the most polluting industries in the world, and then we're left with all this waste. So it was very important to me to do something meaningful with all this leftover fabric, and the idea kind of just came to me one day that I love Boucharouite rugs. These are rag rugs made in Morocco. As a textile designer, they're just so rich. The textures, the colors, the mixing, the upcycling concept, it was perfect. So I was very lucky to meet weavers in Morocco, and we collaborated over the course of 1 year on a series of rugs, and it was quite a magic process of sending them fabric in a box and then with a little sketch, and then receiving 2 months later the results. And I really fell in love with this process, and I called it the Boucharouite project. And after a few years of making the rugs, I had the idea to make shoes as well. I was really hesitant to get back into the fashion industry, but I think the solution for me was mono-products. Keep it really simple, keep the supply chain really small, so it could reflect my values and I could have a full view of everything that was happening. And so in 2018, the collection really became focused on babouches. So the babouches are handmade in Morocco, and they are used with vintage rugs. So we collect vintage rugs in the market or in villages all around Morocco that have finished their life as a floor covering. They're too worn in some places, or there's holes, so we upcycle them into the babouche. And they're all one of a kind because the rugs themselves are one of a kind, made from recycled materials. And when you cut a pattern of the babouche, it's in a different part of the rug. So I'm left with a very interesting business to sell one of a kind pieces to fashion in the fashion world.
And the artisans that you work with in Morocco, tell us a little bit more about those collaborations or achievements?
So we have a very small network. At the beginning, it was one man making all the shoes. And now he's recruited his brother and his son, so it's grown. The weavers, we work with a community of weavers about 60 kilometers outside of Marrakesh. So it's a group of women who unfortunately were badly hit by the earthquake, their community. So their studio right now is not accessible. It didn't fall, but it's been condemned. But at the time, it was quite lovely because it was a space where it wasn't an official cooperative, it was really independent women like coming together in this nice room in their village, and they could spend the days together, and I could supply them beautiful materials for them to then be creative and make rugs.
What weaving process is it exactly?
So they work on
They're
looms.
knotted,
So it's
looms?
one or two women work on a rug at a time. So they're on a loom, and you weave like a kilim technique, and then every few lines, it's a series of knots. So it's like a wool pile rug, except instead of using wool, you're cutting fabric into long strips.
And if you weren't supplying work, are they working with other clients, or what's?
Yeah, I think they do have other clients. The shoemaker now works exclusively for me. He has so much work, he doesn't have time. The weavers, I think they're open to other projects.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if you felt that your business helped support their livelihoods in a significant way.
I think so. It wasn't even, to be honest, I think at the beginning of the project, I didn't think about it too much. And then after visiting for the first time and the production, my logistics person taking me out there to meet them, and he really told me on the drive out there that this project for them has been really life-changing. And someone telling me, like, I don't know, then it really hit me, and it was, I think, really wonderful. And I think I've always tried to be very understanding of their community and their social situation. For instance, the group of weavers, they take time off for harvest season because their entire village will collaborate on harvesting the vegetables or fruits and vegetables and things that grow in their village. And then different religious holidays. So it's, I think I've always been very conscious to be very accommodating of that and to be there to support them.
And I think that's a very vital point, an important point also. I mean, when I work with Nepal, they have a lot of holidays. For them, it's a sort of a social system because they don't have social security at all. So for them, these holidays help to see after their families that are remote. And it's very important. And I want to pick up something that you said before of the mono product. That is also a choice that I made. I mean, I come from the garment and fashion design, and I was creating 80 to 120 pieces, a collection 4 times a year for years. It was a conscious decision. First of all, also, I thought the idea is really nice of these threads coming together. It's like a cloth. It creates this kind of archaic base for a collection in any sense. So I decided to do just shawls and blankets. That also prevents to have less waste. When you do them, you don't have the gender issue. You don't have to, you can work for women, men, fluid persons, or also seasonless. I don't have to follow that kind of a cycle. And it kind of helps families, or not help, but they have such a really great skill, and they face this issue of everything needs to be faster, production orientated. So they started working for less and less money, and somehow what struck me as really sad, they lost value or faith in their skills and their capability. So almost as if it's not worthy to be followed and sought after.
Yeah,
devalued their skill, which is tremendous. I mean, I don't know if you saw the shawls, but there's one particular shawl that has 1,500 threads. To mount that on a loom, it takes days and hours and a lot of skill, and also patience and kind of a mantraic way on going about it. And it's also without electricity, it's hand-loomed, so it's possible to work in remote areas where they don't have electricity. They also can invite other women to collaborate, whereas though I insist that only one person is weaving on one piece, because you can see the energy and the strength of weaving changes from one person to the other. But I thought this sense of giving worth to something that has been almost vanishing due to the fact that there were so pressing orders and more. And that was a process, though, because they felt devalued in a deeper sense, also culturally, that of course they want to seek, like the West, having all the commodities and the accesses to the nice things that is plastic or shiny things, and they lost sense to their values that they have there. So it was for me also an interaction. I work very closely with families, and I traveled to find them and work with them. That process took me 3 years to be able to produce something that I can, sell for our understanding of quality. Not because they wouldn't do it properly, but they've been trained to do it so fast that they lost sense of their own materiality or the way on how to do things. And that took time, but it was a very interesting process, because sometimes when something went wrong, and a lot of things can go wrong, you know, like colors, for example, or some of the patterns, and never I shouted at them, because I think that's a part of the process. Misunderstanding can happen, or they think the colorways maybe are not the way they should be because they're used to different colors due to their customs and cultures. And I always looked at it and thought, that's interesting. Okay, how can we go on from there? And then they would say, you're not angry? I was like, what do you mean? No, yeah, of course, it's not great, but we have to develop on how to go further from here. And then I said, what do you mean? Other people are getting angry, they shout at you? And then they said, yeah, that's what we have on a daily basis. And I thought that was really shocking. I mean, it kind of reminded me why I left the business a long time back. So
I think we share that desire to collaborate with the artisans, that they really do, they bring a lot of value to the process, and then we can also give creative input, and together I think we can create an elevated product that then can have a worldwide scale. Like, I feel very proud that homage shoes are now like in Japan, that they're in Switzerland, that they're in New York, and he really has now an international stage to his product.
And how did he respond to the design? Was it something that he thought was kind of crazy, or did he respond? Did he appreciate that?
Yeah, that's right. I think it's funny because Boogert rug and babouche are two very classic Moroccan crafts, but I think the idea to combine the two was the original twist.
Yeah.
And I was more worried about the technical constraint, about the thickness of the material and being able to make a shoe with it. I think he's quite blasé. You know, he hides it well. That he's just and we've done thigh-high boots. You know, he's willing to try. No, he doesn't. But he's willing to try anything. Like, we had a our Korean sales agents said, you know, I think a tabby would work really well for us. So a tabby is a shoe that, you know, is not at all in the Moroccan lexicon. Like, a Moroccan shoemaker does not know this shoe. And he made it. He really tried. I mean, from photos, from just practice. And that has been so rewarding to work with craftspeople who are ready to try anything. And yeah, maybe he's like silently laughing because, you know, I have like an idea for a thigh-high boot or something like this. And that's been really refreshing because it's not like the French like c'est pas possible like attitude. This is really a, like, let's try everything, and that's been great.
Oh.
Dan moest dus een beetje roepen. Zo is perfect.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not sure if you want to respond to that, Iris.
Well, mine is maybe not as funky as kind of using a different means on how to do it. I mean, a shawl remains a shawl, but I remember that my first color sets, they thought, whoa, those colors, really, you want to use them? And so there was a discussion, but I emphasized more into how they can calculate also, and then, you know, sustain themselves in also venturing into offering what they can do. And there was more calculation aids, and a lot of these women that I work with, they're illiterate, and can't calculate. And of course, I also told them that the end price, I also kind of teach them on the whole systematic, on how the resourcing is be done, and they need to make sure that the water is clean and that they don't throw it away, because sometimes they do, and what kind of dye we use. So we kind of did it together. Sometimes I don't have all the information, at least with the families I worked. And for me it was very important to also make them aware on, if I sell them for, let's say, 390 Swiss francs, it's a tremendous amount for them, and even though I pay them the double of what they normally get, it's a big gap. And then I kind of wrote down all the points of how much the rent is in Switzerland and the delivery, the taxes, and I make it very transparent with them, so also they learn about the value on how certain things then develop further on. And especially Kashmir, for example, experiences a lot of issues right now in Nepal, because when I started off it was like a cradle-to-cradle sort of process. They harvest it themselves, they produce it, and then I bring it as a finished product to Switzerland to earn more money and then to sustain them again financially. And since the demand worldwide has grown tremendously, China being also cornered between China and India, who are big suppliers, they come and buy bunks, like bulks, yeah, and they tend to sell it cheaper because they can sell more, but then that's such a short cycle. So I also teach them, if someone asks you for more, you tell them then it's double the price. So also to give them a certain concept of this systematic.
And are they valuing that exchange with you?
At the beginning they were very shy, and me too. It was a process that we made together. And now I often get phone calls and say, can you explain again? And then can we invite other women for other purposes, maybe not weavers, but other people interested in certain calculation matters or systematics. And I happily do that. I love to do that.
And what other types of clients do they have? What are they, huge brands, or other, are they local things or international? Who do they work with?
Family run, so they're not even production. It's not that you can give an order and then they know how to do.
Yes.
So I worked with them and I kind of guided them there. They were able to weave on a certain order, but not in all the ways. So that was a process we did together. So it's not that I just give an order and say, yes, give me...
No, but you said that they'd had experience with other people they weaved for. So I was wondering just
for simple patterns and simple things, and not going color combined. Or also I do blankets. I didn't bring the blankets, and they're also hand knitted with tassels and very elaborate kind of braiding, and so it's just a process we do together. But eventually, I hope for them that they then gonna be smart enough to offer it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you talked earlier, you mentioned words mindful and purposeful. Are they sort of key values for you today with Delruby?
For me, that's very important. And we discussed earlier on.
I like using words like that, like conscientious, because sustainable, to say you're a sustainable brand, I don't even know what that means. It means so many things. Like sustainability, the pillars of sustainability, there's like 30 of them. So no one can be doing all 30. And then, I've been told like I'm not a sustainable brand because I use leather. So that's like a vegan would say it's not. So it's such a loaded word that I think there are other words just to express that. Yeah, like mindful, just to be like we're conscientious about our supply chain, about sourcing, about selling the product, the end life of the product. It can be, I think
that word kind of includes more of the process, and I don't like to use the word sustainability, but I like to use the word as sustainability, because then also it refers to the conscientious person or buyer, or it's more inclusive, but it's a very complex topic. Cashmere, for example, it's soon going to be not sustainable anymore because it's been so worked on. But initially I did it.
Seeing cashmere for the first time in like H&M, and it's become a fast fashion, product that when it used to be quite recently pretty exclusively luxury product. Do you think, is that true?
Well, that's true in parts, because there's a lot of trickery with cashmere. cashmere goat is an animal that has, like the real cashmere that I use is like from the
neck.
The neck. So it's combed out, and you get 300 grams a year per animal.
Wow.
It's not much.
No.
So of course it can't be delivering all the hanem and sara, but then you can cut it from the lower parts and further away. You can mix it with wool. You can also work on it with synthetics, and then you make it softer, and it's being sold as cashmere. And if you would test it, it's certainly not cashmere. It's impossible to have that
Yes.
kind of offer
Quantities. Yes.
in the market. But that makes it also more tricky to work with cashmere on that level. But then the other level of sustainability, if you work with or tell that I make cashmere with someone who's very conscientious, like vegan, then they would say, but it's harming the animal. And yes, that's also true if it's done in bulks, again, or also merino wool, for example. It depends where you source it, where it comes from. It's so complex.
And so these weavers, they also have the goats.
They have the goats.
Okay.
Yeah. But then again, it's a long process. So it's now that my brand's gotten a little bigger, that also shifted. Sometimes we need to buy it also.
Yes.
And then to really trace the source where it comes from, it becomes trickier and trickier.
Yes, how would, for both your brands, scaling up, how possible is that?
Well, I'm not, that's the thing, I'm not scaling up. For you, it's maybe a little different.
Yeah, I'm not scaling as fast as I think the demand is. I think I've decided that this pace works for me. Like Ahmed, well, now he has a little more help with his son, but I think his production was 300 pairs a month, and I can sell 300 pairs a month, and that's great. And I'm not asking, and it would be nice if he made a little more and I could sell a little more, but there's no pressure in that way, because also this is a sustainable pace for me. This project was born when I was pregnant with my daughter, so I have, other priorities in my life. Like I want to be home at a certain time. I want to be able to take a day off if she's homesick or things like that. So this project for me had to be sustainable in all aspects of my life. So this pace is also good for me. Yeah. I think, this idea, everyone has to grow and keep growing and keep growing. I don't know. We can just be happy, I think, where we are at this moment.
Okay, and for you too, Iris, you have a number of pieces that you produce per year, perhaps, that you've decided, and you've got your business model structured around that, and you're not planning to grow?
No, I'm planning to grow in the sense that I can give up, the other job that I also do to sustain that. I was lucky enough to have, but it's a critical moment. It's going to be tricky in some ways, but what I did, I then shifted to some other material. So I'm also now using yak wool, which is giving another option. But now yak wool has become very hyped too, so it was a very underestimated yarn.
Fiber,
But it's very delicate, it's wonderful, it's very warming, but there the same system starts applying too. So I think I'm just going to be, open enough to whatever I have to adapt in order to remain conscious and also not overdriving the system. But it's always limited editions, it's also handloom, so it's a lot of craft that goes into it. You can't do mass production, then I would compromise my whole system. But then I need to come up with a new idea. And I'm open to that.
I've expanded, like the base of the Boogert project was about upcycling unwanted materials, so leftover fabrics from the luxury fashion industry in Europe. So that was first making rugs, and then with the shoes. Now I make cord, and we make furniture with it. So it could, and then there's more. There's so many more things we can do. So maybe for you, like the scarf project with this group, it's at maximum capacity. But mentioning like your craft atlas, then it's almost exciting to move on, grow with another community and help them the same way you've helped those families.
This might be a naive question, but I've always had the impression that choosing to function like that, almost the fashion system and the buying system and the retail system almost doesn't allow you, because, you know, there's sort of a seasonal structure in the whole retail system, and their demand for newness and growth, and so do you fit in comfortably into the retail buying system? And
no, I think this whole movement, I mean, I chose to quit fashion 30 years ago, and then I kind of came back to it because I think it's about time, more than time, to shift, and I feel it's shifting, but by doing it, I think it can shift. And I don't think it's needed to fight the whole system itself, because the system is so rotten already, it's gonna fall in pieces, or they're gonna do the shift too. That's my belief, or hope, let's say. Mm-hmm. And I think the more you do it, and then you can see it also here, the community is like very aware, and then you have this exchange of like-minded people, so it's infectious, and it kind of helps also the consumer to adapt, because what sometimes lacks is the knowledge about the whole processes behind it, and I think that can be filled through those smaller labels that are conscious and trying to do it, and somehow also empower the consumer. And I think there is something shifting, and that's
I think there are
what makes me helpful.
More brands that are slow fashion, that are seasonless, and that if they work on a wholesale system, there's buyers out there that understand that process and appreciate it.
okay.
One of my business model is either if we take wholesale orders, we can either produce it in 6 weeks, which is really short. It's normally it's like 3 to 4 months.
Okay.
And then, or also we just have a lot of stock, and buyers can buy on stock. So I think we've become a bit niche in that they appreciate this new, fresh approach, and that they can have the product right away, and we deliver all through the year, and we accept orders all through the year, and it's not just Fashion Week where you have to be at a trade show or a private showroom and take orders twice or 4 times a year. We're really working all around. So I think, to be like creating a new business model, I think especially during COVID and post-COVID has been embraced, and I hope that's not just a bubble and we're going to go back to the old system. I hope it'll, and I think there's more and more shops opening that embrace sustainable design and are looking for a new product and looking to discover new brands. So that's really exciting too, to meet new stores and new people.
It makes me also think the discussion yesterday that Cecile and Mara had about that demand, and also people kind of putting pressure. I think it's very important that you stand your ground and that you don't break in or kind of are tempted by these lucrative offers, and of course that takes some guts sometimes, and also, sometimes puts me with fear and thinking, oh, can I sustain it? Is this going to work out? But I think it's important to just stay on the ground and somehow support that, and then with that, it's just going to evolve. And of course, I'm not going to make millions with that, but I think it's maybe worthwhile, and then somehow from there something else can develop. And also I think what I said earlier, when I tell them that when they get these offers for bulk sale of material, they should double the price, because there's always a demand, there's always an offer, and there's always someone matching. And it's just very important that when you feel like it's a weak moment, and you just need to keep standing your ground somehow. That's how I feel about it. But that, of course, comes with sacrifices.
Yes.
I have a nice.
I think maybe something too we didn't talk about, because we talked about buyers in the wholesale network, but in terms of our customer, like the end person who buys the product. When I started making the rugs, I really saw it too as an expression and a way to educate people about textile waste. So if you could see this rug and that it was made from fabric that luxury houses were about to throw away, and you understand waste, and then you understand your own closet and how much you're contributing to landfill, with your textiles. It was sort of an education project, and
Yes.
hopefully it would inspire people. And I think, yeah, educating the customer on the value of a one-of-a-kind handmade product is really special, and hopefully, I think, more special than definitely like a fast fashion product or like a mass-produced product. So I see a role too in communicating with our customer the really added value of that and how special that is.
Yeah,
I think that's a role that's like we've had to take on, and it's an interesting exercise in communication. Not trying to be too virtuous, like preaching sustainable design, like trying to be like a little funny, but like here's my goofy shoes, like they're really fun.
Yeah, and people then start to understand and appreciate the difference, I imagine. So I think we're kind of getting to the end. Is there any questions from the audience? No?
So you talk about producing more product, which obviously is a very clever way from a business perspective of working with leftovers, because you're wearing shoes, but you can have maybe some kind of textures or something like that. Personal question, does it ever get boring?
No, it's really, well, it doesn't, because every week I receive a shipment of shoes, and we open the shoes, and it's like Christmas every week, because every rug is different, every texture. If you appreciate texture and color like I do, every pair is like, oh wow, look at this one. Like,
How many pairs
gosh,
do you have for
well,
yourself?
Not just for me, because sometimes when some go and I'm like, oh, I wish I kept that one. But no, I think it's stayed like fresh for 5 years, and we introduce, we have about 8 styles now, so it's really like once a season or once every 2 seasons we'll introduce a new style. And maybe in a way the project isn't as creative as I wish it was. I mean, but then I remember when I had my own collection, I spent a week designing the collection and then 6 months figuring out how to make it and how to sell it. And so like the creative process was so like limited as well too. I still collaborate with other brands. I still design textiles for people, so that's kind of a way I can express myself still. And then we still make rugs, so it's more on a made-to-order basis now, and so that's always really an exciting moment to collaborate with the client and collaborate with the weavers on something special.
Do you have anything else you'd like to say?
I have another question. I have the feeling that the satisfaction